It wasn't a time to vote. It was hard at best. So that's District 5. Now District 4 is clear that was needed to be shut down.
The whole district.
The whole District 4. My opinion would have been 4 and 5, but I mean it's clear that 4 had to be shut down. No question about it. What happened after that blows my mind. It is just absolutely outrageous. I know that the law said 21 days we have to run a special election. I don't know if the state just didn't get that we have this unique geographical situation in Puna. We have a unique mailing situation in Puna. Excuse me. Most people have P.O. boxes. So the thought of, okay, how do I say this? Chronologically, when the press releases were coming out for the makeup election, the first press release said that there would be a district open in HPP, or a polling place open in HPP, and there would be a polling place open in Keonepoko. So the two precincts that were closed down would be open on the special election day. Within 10 minutes, another press release came back and said only Keonepoko is going to be open on special election day. What? That doesn't make any sense. Half of the voting population in District 4 resides in HPP. You're gonna and if you just look at a map, you got to drive out of HPP. You got to drive the most likely way that most people aren't traveling because it's away from town, and drive all the way down to Keonepoko to vote. No wonder you don't get a voter turnout. It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to make a special election, at least have those precincts open up, or do something special to have a common place. If they would have said Pahoa, I know it might not be legal to change that around, but if it would have been in Pahoa, it would have been more reasonable and would have had more voters going out there. But to hold a special election and only give people in Puna a week, a notification, if that, is ridiculous. When people are recovering from a storm, and even if there was no storm recovery, the way that most people check their mail is like once a week, maybe twice a week. It's just a different way of life. It's not like you get your mail delivered every day, go check your mailbox. And for some reason, on the state side, they didn't think of that. They didn't consider that. So, as Ms. Ford said, 14 days would be a minimum. I would even push it out longer than that. Get that notification out there. I wrote a letter in support as well for stating this information through Hope. It's ridiculous. So I would say if you guys have to consolidate, please try to consolidate in an area that would be common. And if you can't consolidate, don't close down the precincts. And again, I don't think this was done on the county level. I think you guys have a good program. I'm just blown away by what happened. I can't believe what happened. Doesn't even matter. I mean, the results are that doesn't matter. It's when you look at the percentage and the turnout, that's all you have to do is do that math, and you can see it was done in the worst possible way it could have been done, or almost the worst possible way it could have been done. And again, that's not, I think, the county side of it, we're doing the very best we can. Those aren't our shots to make. If those are our shots to make, we would have been, I think, done it a lot different. So I think that you guys have a good plan. I would really, honestly, depending on what happens here, if this lava opens up more, give everybody a mail-in ballot, mail-out a ballot. Everybody have an absentee ballot. I'm not sure if we can do that with the law that we have, or if there's some type of proclamation that could be made, but that would be a fail-safe. If everybody had one, you can still walk in, you can do whatever you want, but everybody in that area has that would be the ultimate fail-safe. In my opinion, that's what we should have, because what happened last time is just unbelievable. I don't even have the words to describe it. So with that, and Stuart, first time, thank you for what you do. Yes, please do.
Could I comment? Thank you. Initially when the proclamation was given in regards to the all-mail for those two precincts, it was because at the time the proclamation was made, it was not known whether the roads would be accessible or when they would be accessible. And just a national philosophy in regards to elections is that whenever there's a postponed election, you need to try to have the postponed election look and be as similar as the primary election was for all of the voters. And so in looking at that, and when the Monday after the hurricane or the tropical storm hit, there was the indication from Civil Defense and Public Works that the roads would be open. Then the decision was made to do it as a polling place election, which was similar to what all the other voters had experienced. And we, on the county level, actually wanted to have it a couple weeks out, but HRS doesn't allow for that. If you have a polling place election, it has to be within 7 days of the primary election, and that's why it had to be done so quickly. And so there's some fundamental things that exist that kind of tie our hands in some ways, and we have to try to follow those things. And so that's why it kind of occurred that way. I guess in retrospect, if the other precincts in that lower Puna area, if we knew the extent that those voters were trapped, the recommendation could have been made to have a postponed election for them, but we did not receive that information to make that recommendation or to even talk about those things. And the timeline was really tight because once the polls had opened, we had no way to change anything. It was kind of set. It was kind of, the ball had been rolling already. The governor, within his powers, could have extended the polling hours for those precincts, but in talking to Senator Ruderman, the realization was that extending it any amount of time would not have made a difference for those folks. And so that's why I think the decision was made not to extend.
So whose idea was it to only open up one precinct on the special election day?
Well, the HPP, we would wanted to have both precincts open, but HPP, the community center was severely damaged. It wasn't known if it was going to be cleared by the time the continued primary was going to occur. And so we decided that because there were so many unknown factors about that we just weren't able to use that facility. There were power lines across the driveway. It was still blocked. It had not been cleared yet.
So in hindsight, doing a traditional polling place was wrong. It should have been mailed out. Because there was just, you know what I mean, when you look at, when you got half of the voting population in HPP, you can't even do a precinct there. And, I mean, it's obviously easy to look at it now and be like, coulda, shoulda, woulda done this. I guess the reason for this is to make sure that we learn from this and don't have the same thing happen twice. So that would be my suggestion. Which is going to come up tomorrow. Some other part of that conversation. So, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Maeda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You look like you're about to fall. But I just want to say, Senator, you know what we are requesting, that change of HRS. I do want to share that when Iselle happened, August 7th, everything changed. And I do want to point out what you did right. And what you did right was close HPP and Keonepoko. I feel that 5 should also have been closed too. And right after Iselle, when I drove around, it was bad. And albizia trees was like 90% of the damage. We just could not get around. Now, when I heard that you were going to do the makeup poll at the end of the month, I was pretty relieved, because when I walked around, people had told me that they couldn't get out, they couldn't vote that day. And after the 15th, and I talked to some people, and they told me stories that they were turned away, and they wanted to vote on the 15th, but they didn't get a chance because that precinct was open on the 9th. And it's unfortunate. I wish it could have been done different. one of the things that I really want to make sure gets changed is that one of the biggest concerns, one of many concerns, is that the only option was to vote digitally. And I felt the option to vote paper needed to be there. I like going to the polls because of the paper copy. I felt that was taken away. It was only digital, and that should not happen again. One of the other things that when I looked at the numbers, I added the total votes. I came out with 3,780, not counting the blank ones. And last 2012, in the primary, it was 4,348, and that was a presidential election. And 4 years before that was much of a bigger district, because redistricting didn't happen, and that was 4,440. Even one vote turned away is bad. Councilmember Kern mentioned it, that I'd felt better if we were given some time to just get our stuff together and then be able to vote. So there's some HRS work that needs to be done, and I know the senator is going to do that. I just wanted to voice out some of the concerns that I had. And it's been such a crazy time. And I just want to say, through all this crazy times, you've been doing your due diligence. And I know most of the decision you could not make on your own. It was made for you. But you executed very well with what you were given. So I just want to say thanks for everything that you've done. And if you can consider the concerns that we have for the next time. Thank you.
I just have a quick request. Mr. Maeda, I don't know if you can pull this off, but I would like to see that the general election for 2014 be for Puna only, and possibly not the Cooper Center area. Okay, Volcano's in Puna, but they only had a small amount of impact from the storm. But because of the lava flow, we know we've got a disaster. We don't know what's going to happen. Can we please just do all mail ballots for Puna, for districts 4 and 5, and that section of 3 that's part of Puna? If there's a precinct in there, I don't know if there is. Is there a precinct in District 3? I know there's a finger that is.
The districts, the precincts that will be affected are going to be
1, 2, 3, and 4.
Keonepoko, the Pahoa High School, and the Pahoa Community Center.
Okay.
Those are the HPP is the next closest precinct, but they're not going to be affected by the lava flow.
I just think, to be fair, treat everybody in Puna equally, mail ballots to everybody in districts 4 and 5, and not even worry about this in any, whether it's a incoming storm or anything else. We know we got a problem going on, so let's deal with it up front. That's my request to you. See if you can get an all mail ballots into districts 4 and 5. That's my request. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's someone else, I'm going to make a few comments. And I did want to ask Senator Ruderman one more question, if you don't mind coming up. Okay, I was confused by how you answered a couple of questions, Mr. Maeda. Who decided that we were not going to do the mail-in ballot? I mean, when that went out, how did it switch to the 7 days? Who switched that? Is that the state or is that the county? That's the state telling us that we had to do that. I mean, I could just remember people coming to me way up in Kohala and like, why are we doing this? and also hearing about that people in these other precincts weren't being able to vote. I mean, I'm not sure how I'm hearing things, and then I hear you say we didn't have this information, so maybe I'm just confused. So I just want to clarify, and maybe, I don't know, Senator Ruderman, if you have anything to say on that, or just enlighten me.
Well, when the decision was made to...
By who?
State Office of Elections, in regards to the all-mail, because they issued the proclamation. We give them input, Civil Defense gave them input, and we all give our input to State Office of Elections about what the circumstances are. And when the decision was to postpone that election, the decision was to do it all mail. And the reason was because at that point in time, that was the Friday before the election was going to occur, that those precincts were closed and postponed. At that time, the conditions were unknown as far as how long it would take to clear roads, what was going to happen,
Right.
what kind of infrastructure problems there were. So it was just unknown. On the Monday after the election, which was the 11th, we had a discussion with Civil Defense, with the State Office of Elections, and at that point in time, the major roads had been cleared, and the subdivision roads were in the process of being cleared in those areas, because we could only look at the precincts that were postponed. We couldn't look at the Nanawale or the lower
Why?
area, because
Why not?
because the law does not allow that.
A state law says you can't look at other
Because the election...
other areas that were open, but nobody could get to
Yeah,
them.
because they had not been postponed before the polls were open. Once the polls were open, the election needed to go on, and the law does not allow us to just make changes at that point in time already. So once the polls were open on that Saturday morning for those precincts, there was not much that could be done. The only thing was that the governor could do a proclamation to extend the hours for those polling sites, but that would not have solved that problem. And so that's the dilemma we were in. And in hindsight, if we knew the conditions in those areas, we would have probably made the recommendation to close those polling places as well. But when we were assessing on the morning after the hurricane, we were assessing our precincts and to make sure they were accessible, to make sure that we could have an election in those precincts. And the two precincts that were inaccessible were HPP and the Keonepoko precincts.
Okay.
And that's why those were postponed. So what happened on Monday was when it was clear from Civil Defense that the roads were being cleared, and throughout the rest of that week, more of the roads would be cleared. Then the decision had been made to do open a polling place, and hopefully we would have been able to open both polling places, but unfortunately that did not occur. And the reason why the decision was to open a polling place was because that more closely resembled the experience that all of the other voters had on election day, and that's the basic election philosophy. And so that's why that recommendation was made. At that point, when the recommendation was made or the decision was made to open a polling place, it had to be done within 7 days because that's what HRS requires, and so that's what we were left with to deal with. Just as some background, after Hurricane Iniki hit Kauai, their election was held 8 days later. Hurricane Andrew in Florida, theirs was held a week after Hurricane Andrew. When 9/11 hit, which was, one of the most major events in our history, they were supposed to vote on that day, and they postponed their election for 2 weeks. And so it's sort of consistent with what happened here with what has happened previously and nationally, and that's part of why those decisions were made.
Okay, Senator Ruderman, do you have a comment?
You know, I agree with almost everything that our county clerk just said, by the way. The governor did have the power to extend the election on the day, once the polls were open. He's correct that once the polls open, the Office of Election or the county clerk did not have authority to extend